The sky above Haven's Rest had been wrong for 17 days. Where once there were stars and the soft glow of twin moons, now there were only ships. Hundreds of them. Black vessels that blocked out the light and circled the small colony world like hungry predators waiting for their meal. Governor Kin Tae-hyun stood at the observation window of the Colonial Administration Building. His reflection stared back at him, a tired man of 53, years with gray streaking through his black hair and deep lines carved into his face by worry. Behind him, the command center buzzed with quiet activity, but everyone moved slowly now. Hope had to wait, and when it left, it took energy with it. "Sir," the voice belonged to Park Ji-yoon, his communications officer. She was young, only 26, but the past weeks had aged her. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes like bruises. "I have completed the daily scan. All frequencies remain jammed. Our last distress beacon was destroyed before we could confirm Earth received our message." Tae-han did not turn from the window. "How long until the ultimatum expires?" 3 days, sir." 3 days. 72 hours until the Dominion Collective came down from their ships and took everything. Their demand had been simple and terrible. Surrender the colony's population for processing, or face complete destruction. No negotiation. No mercy. Just surrender or die. Haven's Rest was not a military world. It was a farming colony, home to 40,000 people who had come to this distant planet seeking peaceful lives. They grew crops. They raised families. They built schools and hospitals and community centers. They had no warships, no soldiers, no weapons beyond what the small security force carried. The orbital defense platforms, 4 aging stations that had been meant to protect against pirates, had been destroyed in the first hour of the siege. The Collective had not even bothered to demand their surrender first. They simply erased them from existence, killing 63 defenders in the blink of an eye. Now there was nothing between the colonists and the enemy but empty space and dying hope. Tae-hyun finally turned from the window. "Have we heard anything from the other colonies? From Earth?" Ji-yeon shook her head. "The jamming is too strong. We are completely cut off." Even if a message had gotten through, Tae-hyun knew the truth that no one wanted to speak aloud. Earth was 6 weeks away at standard faster-than-light speeds. The nearest military outpost was 4 weeks distant. Help was not coming. Could not come. The math was simple and cruel. They were alone, deep beneath the colony's surface. In bunkers that had been built to protect against storms and meteor strikes, 40,000 people waited. The bunkers had never been designed for this. They were crowded, hot, and running low on supplies. But they were safe from orbital bombardment, at least for now. In Bunker 7, the largest of the underground shelters, Chief Medical Officer Lee Soo-min moved between rows of cots where the wounded lay. The initial attack had killed over 200 people and injured many more. She had lost count of how many surgeries she had performed in the past 17 days. Her hands no longer shook. She had moved past exhaustion into some strange place beyond it. A child was crying somewhere in the bunker. The sound echoed off the metal walls, mixing with whispered prayers and quiet sobs. Soo-min paused beside an elderly woman whose arm had been crushed by falling debris. "How are you feeling today, grandmother?" she asked softly. The old woman managed a weak smile. "I have survived worse, doctor. I survived the famine of 47. I survived the plague ship. I will survive this too." Soo-min wished she shared the old woman's faith. In another section of the bunker, Farmer Choi Dong-wook sat with his back against the cold wall, holding his wife, Yoon Hana, close. Their infant son slept between them, somehow peaceful despite everything. Dong-wook was a big man with rough hands built for working the land. He had never felt more helpless in his life. "What will happen to us?" Hana whispered. Donwook had no answer. He had heard the rumors about what processing meant. The collective did not want slaves or servants. They wanted something worse. They harvested species, breaking them down for biological resources, organs, genetic material, chemical compounds. To them, humans were not people. They were raw materials. "We are not going to let them take us," he said, though he did not know how he could keep that promise. "I will not let them take our son." Hana pressed closer to him, and they sat in silence while their world slowly ended. Above ground, the sun set over Haven's Rest. The fields that had been green with crops were now scarred by orbital strikes. The processing plants stood empty. The schools were dark. The streets that had once been filled with life were silent as tombs. In orbit, the collective fleet maintained its perfect blockade. Their commander, a being whose species humanity had never encountered before this attack, watched the planet below with cold patience. He had done this many times before. 17 worlds had fallen to his fleet. 17 species had learned that resistance was pointless. The humans would be no different. They always broke in the end. Some lasted longer than others, but they all broke. Fear and despair were weapons more powerful than any gun. Governor Taehyun worked through the night, though there was little he could do. He reviewed emergency protocols that would not save them. He read messages from community leaders asking questions he could not answer. He stared at the dark ceiling and thought about his daughter, who lived on Earth and did not know her father was about to die. At dawn, he gathered his senior staff in the command center. Their faces were gray with exhaustion and fear. "I will not lie to you," he said. "Our situation is hopeless. No help is coming. In 3 days, the collective will demand our surrender, and we will have no choice but to give it." No one spoke. What was there to say? Ji-yoon broke the silence. "Then what do we do, sir?" Taehyun looked at each of them in turn. These brave people who had worked without rest, who had done everything possible to save their colony. They deserved an answer, even if he did not have a good one. "We survive one more day," he said quietly. "And then we survive the day after that. Until we cannot survive anymore." It was not much, but it was all he had left to give. Outside, the enemy ships continued their endless orbit, patient and certain of victory. They had all the time in the universe. Haven's Rest did not. By day 20, something had changed in the bunkers of Haven's Rest. The tears had dried. The prayers had gone quiet. In their place, a different emotion was growing, one that the collective had never expected and would never understand. Anger. Sergeant Kang. J1 had served in Earth's colonial security forces for 15 years. Before retiring to Haven's Rest, he had come here seeking peace, a quiet place to grow old after decades of violence. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. He gathered the able-bodied colonists in the main hall of Bunker 7. Nearly 300 people stood before him, farmers, teachers, engineers, doctors, shopkeepers. None of them were soldiers, but all of them were human, and humans did not surrender easily. "I am going to be honest with you," J1 said, his voice rough and hard. "We cannot win this fight. The collective has 47 warships in orbit. We have nothing. In 3 days, they will come for us, and there is nothing we can do to stop them." The crowd shifted uneasily. This was not the inspiring speech they had expected. But J1 continued, and his eyes burned with cold fire. "We have a choice in how this ends. We can walk into their processing ships like cattle, heads down, silent and afraid. Or we can make them work for every single life they try to take. We can hurt them. We can make them bleed. We can make them remember that they made a mistake when they came to our world." A young woman pushed through the crowd. Her name was Beek the Jin, an engineer who had spent 5 years maintaining the colony's power grid. She was small, with sharp eyes and quick hands. "The mining equipment," she said, "in the Eastern District. We have industrial lasers, plasma cutters, heavy drilling machines. They are not weapons, but they can become weapons," J1 finished. Something sparked in the crowd. It was small at first, just a murmur, but it grew. People began talking, suggesting, planning. The farmer Choi Dong-wook stepped forward, his big hands clenched into fists. "I have worked explosives for 20 years, he said. "Clearing fields, breaking rocks. I can make bombs." An elderly man raised his hand. His name was Oh Hyun-woo, a retired physicist who had once worked on Earth's defense projects. "The agricultural drones. I can reprogram them. Give them new purposes." Hour by hour, the resistance took shape. The Jin led teams to strip the mining equipment, converting industrial tools into crude but deadly weapons. Dong-wook taught volunteers how to build explosive devices from farming chemicals and mining supplies. Dr. Oh worked through the night, turning peaceful harvest drones into carriers of destruction. Governor Tae-han watched all of this with a mixture of pride and sorrow. These were his people, peaceful farmers who had never wanted to fight. Now they were preparing for war. "You know this will not save us," he said to J1 as they stood apart from the activity. "No," the sergeant agreed. "But it might save our dignity. And maybe, if we hurt them badly enough, it will make them think twice before attacking the next colony." Tae-hyun nodded slowly. There was wisdom in that, dark as it was. Even in death, they could protect others. In a quiet corner of Bunker 7, a 16-year-old girl named Han Eun-bai sat alone. She had lost her parents in the initial attack. Her father had been working at the orbital station, and her mother had been caught in a bombardment while trying to reach the bunkers. Eun-bai had no family left, no home to return to, no future to dream about. She took a small knife and began to carve words into the metal wall of the bunker. The letters were rough and uneven, but clear enough to read, "We were here. We fought. Remember us." An older woman sat down beside her. It was Lee Soo-min, the chief medical officer, taking a rare moment of rest. "That is beautiful," Soo-min said softly. Eun-bai shrugged. "I want someone to know. Someday, when this is over, someone might find this place. I want them to know we did not just give up." Soo-min put an arm around the girl's thin shoulders. There were no words of comfort she could offer, no promises she could make. So she simply sat with her, two humans facing the darkness together. Above them, in orbit, the collective commander received reports of increased activity in the human bunkers. His intelligence officers believed the colonists were preparing some kind of resistance. This amused him. He had seen resistance before. Every species tried it, in their own way. The insectoids of Keth Prime had fought with poisoned mandibles and suicide swarms. The rock dwellers of Gareth had collapsed their own tunnels to bury his soldiers. The water beings of Tethys had poisoned their own oceans. None of it had mattered. The collective was patient, thorough, and unstoppable. The humans would learn this lesson as all the others had. "Let them prepare their little weapons," he said to his officers. "It will make the harvest more entertaining." On the surface of Haven's Rest, the last sunset before the ultimatum painted the sky in shades of red and gold. Governor Tae-hyun stood before a camera, recording a message that he knew no one would ever receive. "To whoever finds this recording," he said, "My name is Kim Tae-hyun, Governor of Haven's Rest. Tomorrow, the Dominion Collective will attack our colony. We cannot win. We cannot escape. But we have chosen to fight." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We are farmers and teachers, doctors and engineers, parents and children. We came to this world seeking peace, and instead we found war. But we are also human. And humans do not surrender. We do not bow. We do not break. His voice strengthened. Tell our families on Earth that we died standing. Tell our children that we fought for them. Tell the universe that humanity does not go quietly into the night. He ended the recording and saved it to every data storage device he could find, hoping that someday, somehow, someone would discover the truth of what happened here. That night, no one in the bunker slept. Families held each other close. Old enemies made peace. Lovers spoke words they had been too afraid to say. Children asked questions that had no good answers. J1 gathered his volunteer soldiers, 217 men and women who'd agreed to fight on the surface when the attack came. They were not enough. They had never been enough. But they were ready. Tomorrow, he told them, we show them what humans are made of. In her corner of Bunker 7, Unbai added more words to the wall. They came for us in the dark. We met them with fire. And somewhere, far across the galaxy, something was moving through the void. Something fast. Something angry. Something human. But no one on Haven's Rest knew that. Not yet. The collective landing craft descended at dawn. They came in waves, hundreds of black vessels, falling through the morning sky like drops of poison rain. Each one carried soldiers bred for war, equipped with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. The first wave alone numbered 10,000. More would follow. Governor Kim Tae-hai stood in the command bunker, watching the descent on screens that flickered with interference. His hand rested on a small device connected to the bunker's emergency systems. If everything failed, if the colony fell completely, he would activate the self-destruct sequence. The collective would take nothing but ashes and bones. All surface teams are in position, reported Sergeant Kang J1 through the radio. We are ready. Ready to die, Taehan thought but did not say. Ready to sell their lives as dearly as possible. Ready to make the enemy pay for every step. On the surface, 217 volunteers waited in hidden positions throughout the colony. They carried improvised weapons, industrial lasers that had been given targeting systems, plasma cutters mounted on farming vehicles, mining charges buried beneath the streets. It was a desperate, hopeless defense, but it was all they had. The first wave of landing craft touched down at the edge of the colony. Ramps opened, and collective soldiers poured out tall, gray-skinned creatures with too many joints and eyes that reflected no light. They moved with terrible efficiency, spreading across the empty streets. J-1 watched them come. Hold, he whispered into his radio. Hold. The enemy pushed deeper into the colony, searching for the humans they had come to harvest. They found empty buildings, abandoned homes, silent streets. Now, J1 said. The first explosion tore through a squad of collective soldiers, sending bodies flying. Before they could react, a mining laser carved through their ranks from a hidden position. A swarm of agricultural drones, reprogrammed by Dr. O, descended on a second landing zone, their cargo bays filled with explosive charges. For one glorious moment, the colonists fought back. For one glorious moment, the collective bled, but it could not last. The enemy recovered quickly. Their superior numbers and weapons pushed through the ambush. One by one, the human positions fell silent. J1 watched his volunteers die on his tactical display, little lights blinking out like candles in a wind. Fall back to secondary positions, he ordered, knowing there were few secondary positions left. Keep fighting. In the command bunker, Taehan's hand tightened on the self-destruct trigger. Perhaps it was time. Perhaps, then the sky cracked. There was no other word for it. The sky itself seemed to split open, and a sound rolled across the planet like thunder made by gods. Every human, every collective soldier, every ship in orbit all stopped and looked upward. Space folded. light bent in ways that hurt to look at. The air itself screamed as something pushed through from somewhere else. And then it arrived. The UE's indomitable burst from slipspace directly above the colony. It was a dreadnought-class warship, 3 kilometers of armored hull bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It arrived at point-blank range to the enemy fleet, appearing exactly where no ship should be able to appear, inside the gravity well past the defensive perimeter. In the heart of the collective formation, it was impossible. Faster-than-light travel did not work that way. Ships could not exit slipspace so close to a planet. The physics would not allow it. The safety protocols would prevent it. And no captain would be insane enough to try. But there it was, on the bridge of the Indomitable. Captain Shin Min-ho rose from his command chair. He was a hard man, 58 years old, with a face carved by 30 years of war. Scars traced lines across his left cheek from a battle that had killed half his crew. His eyes were cold and dark, but deep within them burned a fire that had never gone out. "All hands," he announced, his voice echoing through every corridor of the massive ship. "Battle stations. We have civilians to protect." Executive Officer Wang Su-yeon was already at the tactical station, her fingers flying across the controls. "Captain, enemy fleet count is 47 vessels. They outnumber us significantly." Minho looked at the display showing the enemy fleet cruisers, destroyers, transports, and one massive dreadnought that matched his own ship in size. 47 against 1. He smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had finally found his prey after a long and hungry hunt. "Then it is almost a fair fight," he said. "Weapons, you may fire when ready." The Indomitable's main battery spoke. 12 railgun turrets, each capable of launching projectiles at a fraction of light speed. 8 heavy missile pods loaded with nuclear warheads. 4 plasma lances that could cut through a mountain. All of it opened fire at once, aimed at the nearest collective cruiser. The cruiser did not have time to raise shields. It did not have time to maneuver. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the fury of a human warship that had crossed impossible distances to be here below. On the surface of Haven's Rest, J1 stared at the sky in disbelief. His radio crackled with voices, his volunteers, the civilians in the bunkers, everyone speaking at once. "What is that? It came from nowhere. Is that one of ours?" In the command bunker, Park Ji-yoon checked her instruments 3 times before she believed what she was seeing. Tears were running down her face, but she was laughing. "Sir," she said to Governor Taehyun, her voice breaking with emotion. "Sir, that is a human warship. Earth Defense Fleet, the U.S. Indomitable." Taehyun released his grip on the self-destruct trigger. His legs felt weak. He leaned against the console for support. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Earth is 6 weeks away." "I do not know how, sir, but they are here." They came. On the screens, another collective ship exploded under the Indomitable's fire. Then another. The enemy fleet, which had seemed so powerful and unstoppable, was now scrambling in confusion. In Bunker 7. Young-Han Yunbai heard the cheering before she understood what was happening. She pushed through the crowd to find a screen, and there she saw it, a human ship, fighting for them, dying for them, saving them. She ran back to the wall where she had carved her words. With trembling hands, she added a new line beneath her farewell message. "They came for us." Above Haven's Rest, the battle was only beginning. The collective had recovered from their shock and were coordinating a response. The Indomitable was surrounded, outnumbered, taking fire from all directions. But Captain Shin Min-ho had not come all this way to lose. "Helm," he commanded. "Put us between the landing craft and the colony. Nothing gets to the surface." The massive dreadnought moved like a dancer, sweeping through the enemy formation, its weapons blazing. Collective ships tried to flee. They tried to fight. They tried to survive. None of it mattered. Humanity had arrived. Captain Shin Minho had spent 30 years learning how to destroy things. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts of Seoul. He had put down rebellions on colony worlds. He had faced 3 separate alien incursions and walked away from all of them. The Earth Defense Fleet called him the Wolf of the Void, and he had earned that name in blood. But today was different. Today was personal. His younger sister, Shin Yuna, had emigrated to Haven's Rest 5 years ago. She had sent him pictures of her small farm, her growing crops, her quiet life far from the wars that had consumed his own existence. She had been happy there. She was down there now, in those bunkers, waiting to die. Minho had received a distress call 6 days ago. High Command had said it was hopeless. Haven's Rest was 6 weeks away at standard FTL speeds. No ship could reach them in time. The colony was lost. Minho had disagreed. The Indomitable carried an experimental slipspace drive, designed to push the boundaries of faster-than-light travel. It had never been tested at full capacity. The engineers said it might work. They also said it might tear the ship apart at the molecular level. Minho had ordered full speed anyway, for 4 days. The Indomitable had screamed through slipspace, its experimental drive burning white-hot, its structural integrity warnings blaring non-stop. Components failed. Systems overloaded. 17 crew members died when a section of the hull lost containment, but they had arrived. Damage report. Minho ordered as another collective ship exploded on the main display. Engineering Chief, No. Sung-ho's voice came back stressed but steady. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. We have lost power to the port weapons array. The experimental drive is completely burned out. We are not going anywhere fast for a long time. How long can we fight? A pause. As long as you need us to, Captain. That was the answer Minho wanted. He turned back to the battle. The collective fleet had recovered from its initial shock. Their commander, whoever he was, had reorganized the remaining ships into a coordinated assault. Instead of 47 independent vessels, Minho now faced a unified force attacking from multiple angles. Plasma fire hammered the Indomitable shields. The deck shuddered beneath Minho's feet. Shields at 60%, reported Su-Yan. They are concentrating fire on our weapons arrays. Then we need to finish this quickly. Bring us around to bearing 275. Weapons. Target that cluster of cruisers on our port side. The dreadnought turned, its massive engines flaring. Even wounded, even outnumbered, it moved with deadly grace. The cruisers tried to scatter, but they were too slow. Navigation Officer N. Taeyang executed the maneuver perfectly. The Indomitable swept through the enemy formation like a blade through silk. Its remaining weapons blazed, and 3 cruisers vanished in fire and debris. In the weapons bay deep within the ship, Gunnery Chief Yang Ji-ho orchestrated destruction with cold precision. His people worked their stations with desperate efficiency, loading missiles, adjusting targeting systems, routing power to whichever weapon needed it most. Port arrays back online, reported one of his gunners. Then use it, Ji-ho replied. Everything we have got. Do not stop until they are all dead, or we are. On the surface of Haven's Rest, the colonists watched the battle in the sky. Each explosion, each flash of weapons fire, drew cheers or gasps. They had been alone for so long, forgotten by the universe, left to die. Now someone was fighting for them. Sergeant Kang Jae-won rallied his surviving volunteers. The collective soldiers who had landed were now cut off from their fleet, confused and vulnerable. Jae-won intended to make them pay for every step they had taken on his world. Push them back to their landing craft, he ordered. They are the ones trapped now. The hunters had become the hunted dot in orbit. The battle reached its peak. The collective flagship, a massive dreadnought, almost as large as the Indomitable, turned its full attention to the human ship. Its commander had realized that victory depended on destroying this one vessel. Both dreadnoughts faced each other across the void. Both unleashed everything they had. The Indomitable shuddered under the assault. Explosions ripped through its hull. Emergency klaxons screamed. Damage reports flooded the bridge. Forward shields failing, Su Yan reported. Blood ran down her forehead from a gash where flying debris had struck her. Decks 12 through 15 are gone. We are losing atmosphere in multiple sections. Minho gripped his armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. His ship was dying. His people were dying. But the colony was still there, still alive, still waiting for salvation. Then we finish this now, he said. All power to main batteries. Everything we have left. Target their reactor core. The weapons officer hesitated. Sir, if we divert power from life support, do it. The lights on the bridge flickered and dimmed. The air grew thin. Every remaining joule of energy the Indomitable possessed flowed into its weapons dot, and then the dreadnought fired. A single, massive blast. Railgun slugs, missiles, plasma lances, all of it focused on one point. The collective flagship shields collapsed under the assault. The slugs punched through its armor. The missiles followed. Burrowing deep into its hull dot, the reactor core went critical. The explosion was visible from the surface of Haven's Rest. A new sun bloomed in the sky, briefly outshining the morning light. The collective flagship vanished, consumed by nuclear fire. The remaining enemy ships froze. Their commander was gone. Their fleet was broken. They had come expecting an easy harvest and found only death. One by one, they turned and fled. Their engines flared as they jumped to slipspace, abandoning their soldiers on the surface, abandoning the battle they could no longer win. On the Indomitable's bridge, Minho watched them go. His ship was barely functional. Life support was failing. Fires burned on a dozen decks. But they had won. Stand down from battle stations, he said quietly. Begin rescue operations. Get our people to the surface. They need medical help. Su Yan looked at him with exhausted eyes. Sir, we need medical help too. The colonists first. That is why we came. On the surface, J1 accepted the surrender of the remaining collective soldiers. Without support from orbit, without hope of evacuation, they had no choice. The colonists took them prisoner, treating them more humanely than they deserved. In the bunkers, the cheering would not stop. People who had accepted death now faced life. Strangers embraced. Children laughed for the first time in weeks. Prayers of despair became prayers of thanksgiving. Governor Taehyun stood in the command center, staring at the scarred and broken warship that hung in orbit above his world. It had come from nowhere. It had done the impossible. It had saved them all. Who are you? He whispered to the ship he could not see clearly through his tears. Why did you come? Miles above, Captain Shin Minho asked for a communication link to the surface. When it connected, he spoke 4 words. Is Shin Yuna alive? And on Haven's Rest, a Farah named Yuna heard her brother's voice for the first time in years and wept. 3 days after the battle, the U.S. Indomitable still hung in orbit above Haven's Rest. Its hull was scarred with damage. Its engines were cold. Its experimental drive was nothing but melted slag. But it was alive, and so were the 40,000 people it had saved. Shuttles moved constantly between ship and surface, carrying wounded colonists up to the Indomitable's medical base and bringing supplies down to the bunkers. The ship's doctors worked alongside Dr. Lee Soo-min, treating injuries that had gone untended for too long. Governor Kim Tae-hyun rode one of those shuttles up to the warship, He had requested a meeting with the captain, and the captain had agreed. The hangar bay of the Indomitable was massive, large enough to hold a dozen smaller vessels. Tehan walked across the metal deck, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Crew members moved around him, repairing damage, restocking supplies, doing the endless work that kept a warship functioning. Captain Shin Minho waited for him near a viewport that looked down on Haven's Rest. He was exactly what Tehan had expected, hard, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much death. But there was something else in those eyes, something softer, when he looked at the planet below. "Governor," Minho said, offering his hand. Tehan shook it. "Captain, I do not know what to say. Thank you seems too small." "Then do not say it. We did what we had to do." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking at the world they had fought for. "How?" Tehan finally asked. "How did you reach us in time?" "Our calculations said 6 weeks." Minho's expression darkened slightly. "We pushed our experimental drive beyond every safety limit. We crossed 6 weeks of space in 4 days." He paused. 17 of my crew died during the journey. The drive is destroyed. We may be here for months while repairs are completed." Tehan felt the weight of that sacrifice settle on his shoulders. "They died saving us. We will remember them. Make sure you do." A commotion near one of the shuttle bays drew their attention. A woman was running across the deck, ignoring the protests of the crew members who tried to stop her. She was small, weathered by years of farm work, with tears streaming down her face. "Brother," she cried out. Minho's hard expression cracked. For the first time since the battle, something like warmth entered his eyes. He moved to meet her, and they embraced in the middle of the hangar bay, the legendary captain and the simple farmer, siblings reunited after years apart. "Yuna," Minho said softly, "you are safe. You came," she whispered. "Everyone said it was impossible, but you came." Tehan watched the reunion with a lump in his throat. He had wondered why one captain would risk everything, his ship, his life, on an impossible mission. Now he understood. Love, family, the bonds that connected humans across any distance. Over the following weeks, Haven's Rest slowly returned to life. The bunkers emptied as families reclaimed their homes. The fields were replanted. The schools reopened. Children played in streets that had recently been battlefields. Sergeant Kang Jae-won found himself sitting on a bench in the town square with young Han Eunbai. The girl who had carved farewells into bunker walls now helped with the reconstruction, carrying supplies and running messages. She had grown up fast, but there was hope in her eyes that had not been there before. "Why did they come?" she asked. "We are nobody, just farmers on a little colony world. Why would they risk everything for us?" Jae-won thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because to humans, there is no such thing as nobody. Every life matters. Every colony matters. If they had let us die, if they had said the distance was too far or the odds were too bad, then what would humanity be? Just another species that abandons its weak? He shook his head. That is not who we are. That is not what we do. When one of us is in trouble, others come to help. It does not matter if it is a neighbor down the road or a colony on the other side of the galaxy. We come. Eunbai nodded slowly. I carved something on the bunker wall. Before they arrived, I thought it would be our grave marker. What did it say? We were here. We fought. Remember us. She smiled slightly. After the ship came, I added more. They came for us. Jae-won put a hand on her shoulder. That is a good thing to remember. Captain Minho finally found time to walk the streets of the colony with his sister. Yuna showed him her farm, the small house she had built, the fields she had tended, the life she had made for herself far from war. You could have died, she said. You almost did die. For me. For you, he agreed. And for all of them. That is what we do, Yuna. That is what it means to be human. She looked at her brother, this hard man who had crossed the stars to save her. When you are old, she said, when you are done with fighting, come here. Live on my farm. Plant crops instead of battles. For the first time in years, Minho laughed. It was rusty and rough, but real. Maybe I will. Dr. Lee Soo-min documented the events for the historical record. She spent hours interviewing survivors, collecting accounts, preserving the memory of what had happened. On the last page of her report, she wrote, when the universe told us we were alone, when logic said no help would arrive, humanity answered with a truth older than the stars. We do not abandon our own. Ever. The indomitable came not because victory was certain, but because some things matter more than odds. Some things matter more than safety. Some things matter more than life itself. The day finally came when the indomitable was ready to leave. Repairs were complete enough for the journey home, though the ship would never be the same. Too much of it had burned getting here. Governor Taehyun gathered the entire colony at the spaceport. 40,000 people stood together, looking up at the sky where the warship waited. They did not have to come, Taehyun said, his voice carried by speakers across the crowd. The math said it was impossible. The regulations said it was too dangerous. Common sense said they should have let us die. He paused, letting the silence build. But they came anyway, because that is what humans do. We reach across the void for each other. We fight impossible battles. We die for strangers. And when anyone asks why, the answer is simple. Because we are human. And that means something. The crowd raised their hands in salute as the Indomitable's engines ignited. The great ship rose slowly, majestically, its scarred hull gleaming in the sunlight. On the bridge, Minho looked down at the colony one last time. Yuna was down there, safe and alive, waving goodbye. He raised his own hand in response, though she could not see him. Helm, he said quietly. Take us home. The Indomitable turned toward the stars and vanished into the void. And across the galaxy, the Dominion Collective received reports of what had happened at Haven's Rest. They learned that a single human ship had crossed impossible distances, had defeated a fleet many times its size, had refused to surrender, even when all logic said they should. They learned that humanity was not a species to be harvested, not a species to be threatened, not a species that would ever abandon its own. They learned to be afraid, because when you threatened one human, you threatened all of them, and they would cross the void itself to prove it.